Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our draft prospect show. Logan Landers is our producer and engineer. Vincent Turner, our co-host and founder. I'm Harper LaBelle, and today, Vincent, we get to talk about a young man, but a gigantic man from Alabama A&M, an HBCU, where there aren't as many guys that get at the looks that they would love to have at the Power Four conference level. But it doesn't mean that there's not a lot of talent out there. And we're going to talk about Carson Vinson, young man. He's 6'6". He's 305 pounds. He's out of Alabama A&M, as I mentioned. You may not know a lot about him right now, but we're going to tell you some things that may get you wondering, is this guy going to be a day 3 or possibly a day 2 pick now for the National Football League draft here in a couple of months? Vincent, when I first think about, his size, his not just his weight, but things that he's able to do and his athleticism, I'm thinking there is a sky's the limit type potential for Carson Vinson. Tell me what you have found out about him and what impresses you most about this young man.
Alabama A&M. What more can you say? Hall of Famer John Stallworth, who's very active in the program. So this young man got some outstanding advice. What I love about him, as you just mentioned, Harp, his size. When you're an offensive tackle that size, you got potential to playing on the next level. Then you think about all the old tackles that came out of the HBCUs. This gentleman reminds me of Howard Ballard that played at Alabama A&M, the great legendary Art Shell, Henry Lawrence, Rayfield Wright, Larry Little, Jackie Slater, Eric Williams, Leon Gray, Herbert Scott. And you look at this young man right here, I think he's going to represent the HBCUs. But this is most of all stat I love about him. He started every game while he was on campus at Alabama A&M. 48 games. First team all SWAC this year. He's got everything you want as we talk about skill set, length, and lower body foundation. But most of all, what I'm excited about this young man, there was a lot of people after the season questioning, does he belong on the next level, which is the NFL? But he went down to the Senior Bowl this past year in 2025. And all I have to say, Harp, is look at the game film, him going up against Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M, who everybody says got a first-round grade at the defensive end position. And Mr. Vinson did this number. I belong there, just like you did, Harp. You playing your 11th grade years in the National Football League. Back to you, Harp.
Yeah, that's the thing that nobody really knows until you go against the top competition, because when you're not playing at the same level, if you're not in an SEC conference or an ACC or a Big Ten now, they have to question whether or not you play against the type of talent that you will be going against in the NFL. But Carson did a great job at the Senior Bowl, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But here are some things that you want to look at with him. One of the first things is how impressive he is with his feet. So as big as he is, again, 6'6", he's over 300 pounds, he can move. And he doesn't appear to get tired. He's got a low base. He's strong. But if you look at the picture on the left, you can't really tell the one on the right. When I look at him, I'm going, he's got long arms, that's for sure, but he doesn't have that size. He doesn't look massive. And so that, to me, spells one of two possible options. He's skinny for his size, which he might be weak and may not be good enough to play at this level, or the potential for him to add 10 or 15 pounds of muscle just in a year or two and be able to get a little bit stronger, get his bench press from 350 to 4.25 to 475, or even higher than that, depending. The potential upside, especially with his athleticism, we'll see what he runs at the combine. If he's invited to that, that'll be an interesting take as well, or at least his pro day. If he's under 5 flat, you got to be able to take a chance on a guy like that. But some of the things that he wins repetitions with his feet. Even if he gets out of position for an instant, he's able to catch up to a guy that wants to go around him. That's a plus. And most people, when they get behind, they stay behind. He has the ability to move around, where if a guy tries to spin around the outside of him and get past him, he can catch up to him and push him by the quarterback. He mirrors defenders quite well, and he latches on in the run game. He latches on. He gets in contact with you, and he stays on you. and he's not holding, but what he's doing is keeping you from making the tackle. That's worth its weight in gold. And that's one of the reasons some of the folks that were at the FCS level saying this is one of the top recruits that you're going to find at his position anywhere. He's very good at what he does. He has some weaknesses, but don't get me wrong, he has plenty of strengths. But talk a little bit about what you were able to see at the Senior Bowl and his ability to compete against some of the guys at the highest level.
Violent hands, A+. Intangibles. He showed what he can do at that level, playing at the Senior Bowl, doing the practices, that he can be a very strong force in the National Football League. And as you mentioned, I don't have to keep repeating this, but you mentioned it real closely, Harper, a few seconds ago. When you play an offensive tackle in the National Football League, quick feet, A+. A+. Back to you, Harper.
Yeah, there were some things. It's funny. There's sometimes the same writer will say one of his strengths is A, and then one of his weaknesses is he doesn't have enough of A. So I got to kind of weed through that, because you said he had strong, powerful hands. I'm saying that one of the critiques of him was, and this is not me saying this, somebody else saying that he has a late strike with his hands. In other words, he's a little slow. I get that. He hasn't gone against top competition. I get that as well. He gives up too much ground during pass pro. So when he's backing up, instead of backing up for a total of 6 yards, he might go 6.5 or 7, and he makes it very easy to set himself up for a bull rush. I get that. Those are things that can all be corrected and worked on, especially with your hands. If you can move your feet quickly, your hands have to follow. It's just a physics things with motion. And so I think coaching will correct some things, and no matter what lineup he ends up in, he'll be a guy that is going to be probably a prospect at first. I don't think he's going to be a day one guy that comes in and says, I'm going to take somebody else's job, but he's certainly going to be a guy that goes, we want him on our roster. And the worst case scenario is that the potential for him in a year or two, if he's a slow developer, and I'm not saying that he is, but if that's the case, Vincent, you keep him on developmental. As a worst case scenario, you let him have a year, maybe even 2, and next thing you know, you may have a starter and a guy that you got in the 6th or 7th round that could play for you for an extra 10 or 12 years. That, I think, was part of the upside with him. But we don't know how pro-ready he is yet, but obviously the Senior Bowl was a big indication in the right way. He turned some heads, and he had a lot of people going, this guy went from I don't know much about him to now I do. That's the thing. I do want to know more about him. And I think there's a lot of offensive line coaches and personnel directors that feel the same way.
They said the same thing about this young man that came out by Alabama A&M in the 5th round some years ago. They was really hyped on Dwight Feeney, who they took number 1 overall. But I think Mr. Robert Mathis ended up becoming a pretty good edge rusher in the National Football League for the Indianapolis Colts. That's all I got to say. Mike has dropped. Carson Vinson is going to be a player at the next level. Back to you, Paul.
He's not a top prospect in that he's going to be a day 1 or an early day 2 guy. But I think that he has the potential right now, and especially with that late Mobile experience that he had, where he goes down, he goes against some of the top competitors in the area and shows what he can do. There's obviously room for improvement, but at least he shows that he's here to stay, and that's the great thing about it. I have a lot of hard work in front of him, but hopefully that all gets to pay off for him here in the near future. So Carson Vinson, 6'6", 305-pound offensive tackle from Alabama A&M. We wish you well. Vincent, final thoughts about Carson before we head out today.
This young man is going to be a player at the next level. He's going to get developed. And I think when it's all said and done, we're going to be mentioning his name as one of the not top tackles in the game, but a pretty good tackle that can have a 10-year career in the National Football League.
Yeah, and if worst case scenario, he just goes out and he's one of those guys that makes your roster, makes it better. In the developmental portion of it right now, it may not be ready immediately today, but in the future, you'll say, we got this guy, and it was of value for us to do so. That's what I'm thinking. So for Vincent Turner, for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, I'm Harper LaBelle. Just want to say thank you for tuning in to the Draft Prospect Show that we have here on 100 Yards of Football. We thank you for tuning in. Have a fantastic day, everybody.